So I'm painfully aware, I think I'm the last speaker. So I didn't want to drive the data part too hard after a whole full day of discussing data of various aspects. So I wanted to talk about something else I'm really passionate about, which is building data strategies from culture and measuring the intangibility around that sometimes. So do I have the clicker? Oh, right, it's right here, sorry. So as I mentioned, I work for Proximity London, and what we're really obsessed with is getting close to human nature and all of its complexity, and to me that means combining implicit research methods and behavioral science methodology, pairing that with all the rich customer data that we use on a day-to-day basis, and really getting close to what it is that makes human beings tick and trying to figure out what motivates them. So today I want to talk about some brands that are leveraging culture in really interesting ways and why that is becoming so important. And I'll talk about some of the best ones that I've seen lately, and then some of the ones that I'm working with one-on-one. But before I jump into all of that, I just wanted to do kind of this year in review to overlook some of the crazy things that have happened in 2018. So France won the World Cup. That was pretty exciting. Yes, my partner is French, so that was genuinely exciting for me to experience. So Instagram launched ITV, some royal wedding happened. The Cambridge Analytica shit show happened. Childish Gambino dropped This Is America. It was pretty dope. The Me Too movement was super prolific. The Kavanaugh hearings were massively aired to everyone. This guy keeps coming around. Logan Paul glorified a dead body on YouTube. Stephen Hawking passed away, true hero. And then, maybe not a true hero, Kanye West keeps endorsing Donald Trump through the midterm elections. And what this means for brands, or why any of that is relevant for brands, is that people expect brands to behave more and more like people, and we're seeing that brands that embrace, sorry, I'm not clicking, but it keeps going. So, I don't know if it's my laptop or something. But so people expect brands to be more human, and the brands that are doing best at this are behaving, or I guess they have the best brand equity and the best reputation. They're just coming out and acting like people. So for me, that's really important because I want to drive data strategies with my clients that think about things long term. And I think as an industry, it can be really hard to get people to think about the long term. We're very impatient and we just want immediate ROI. But sometimes it takes a bit longer. And I think there was a stat from a talk I just went to recently where 58% of our revenue comes from long-term brain connection. So it's not going to be super immediate all the time. So I wanted to talk about a few brands that I've seen doing some interesting things in reaction to culture recently. I'll work backwards from this side. I guess I like this side better. So Virgin Trains. They are super snarky. They have come out of the woodwork for LGBTQ rights, and they are blatantly unapologetic for their stance on that. So some of the other ones, I had some up on my screen because the way they respond to people is kind of crazy. But sorry, I didn't do that. I don't know what's happening. I've got a video next. But so some of the other things that they say to people are, some guy said, I should have thought you ought to be concentrating on running your train service. And Virgin responds with, we can support basic human rights for all while running our train service, David. It's called multitasking. And someone else responded to them and said, well, I suppose when you're just about to have your franchise taken from you, what better way to react than a pointless publicity stunt to show how hip and modern you are? To which they responded, yes, supporting the rights of people in the LGBTQ plus community is just a publicity stunt, and not because we're decent human beings, Rory, with a large and diverse workforce. So while that may make some of the PR professionals in the room cringe, we are seeing brands really come out and be, sorry guys, and be really forward with what they want to communicate. Famously in the middle, we know that Nike dropped their Believe in Something ad this year. And I know we're going to be sick to death of it as a use case in a year's time. But this was really significant, and this landed beautifully for them. Of course, people are arguing that it didn't land beautifully for them. But the fact of the matter is their target audience wasn't maybe cranky, older, white guys who've been wearing white Reeboks for 3 decades. So they know that the future is changing, and they really zeroed in on their target audience, which is a younger, more diverse array of people. And they understand that the world is getting more, sorry. They understand that the world is getting, it's going to be more and more mixed race. And the people that are really latching onto that brand responded quite well to this. And Patagonia, I think, is a US brand only. I'm not sure if it's over here, but they do an amazing job of responding to things when it goes against their ethos. So, for example, whenever any legislation is passed that is anti-environment or harms the environment anyway, they'll just shut their website down and say, this has happened, and they urge you to take action, and they basically promote the cause over what they're trying to sell you. They actually also closed all of their stores today for the midterm elections to push their employees to go vote for the things that they stand behind. And they'll shut their website down sometimes during significant voting events to encourage people to go vote and not shop during those times. So the video that I'm going to show you that keeps playing anyway is REI. It's a similar brand to Patagonia, and it is an example of how another brand really embraces their ethos. And in this case, their whole brand values are around going outside and being with friends and family. So on the biggest shopping day of the year for retail, Black Friday, they shut all of their stores, and they encouraged all of their employees to go outside and be with their families during that time. And they took it a step further, and they too shut down their website during that time. So for all of the brands I just discussed, and REI included, I'll send around the case study video. You can watch it on your own time. But all of these brands all have 3 things in common, which are how to stay culturally relevant and a light of trends and react in significant ways. A lot of them plug in influencers where appropriate to try to drive that maximum impact. I'll touch on influencer marketing in a minute. And then operate with planned spontaneity. So understanding what's going on around you and how it's affecting your consumers in important ways is something that these brands all embrace and do really well with. So something we do with, I've got 2 clients I can talk about, but we do this for Bacardi, and they have a couple brands that are smaller brands. We call them rebel brands, because basically they give us a lot of creative freedom, and we trial a lot of strategies with these brands before we try and carry them out with some of the bigger brands. And for some of the smaller rebel brands, our demographic is 18 to 25-year-olds, and we want to be as culturally relevant to them as possible. And so we drop community managers in our target markets, which sometimes can be not typical target markets. So how can we connect with people on a local level where they probably aren't getting very many marketing messages that are truly tailored to them because they live in, not the huge markets like the US and UK. So it skipped ahead, but there were 3 guidelines that I usually go to when I'm building out my data strategies, and it's targeting the right platform at the right audience at the right time. And that's really important, because if social isn't working for a particular audience, that's fine. Let's figure out where it will work and execute on that. And my second guideline was around peer-to-peer content being most trusted, which is, it's a tale as old as time and advertising itself. We know that people trust each other over what brands are going to say to them. And as a result of that, we use influencer marketing in clever ways. But I think with all of the controversy swirling around that at the moment, that's a whole other presentation I think I could go off into. But I try and keep in mind that we would rather give 1 million influencers $1 rather than pay one influencer $1 million. So how can we start brand conversations and make meaningful content that will resonate with our audience? And then finally, some emotionally engaging content matched by audience need. How can we tap into what people really care about? And some of the greatest brands out there aren't putting their products, it's not all, I mean, we call it bottle porn with all the stuff we do with Bacardi. And while we still do that to some degree, sometimes it works. So it's not always about your product, as the last guy was saying. Sometimes people don't want to talk about menial things, and we want, as you know, some of my clients sell things that are that probably, I don't know, dish soap and things that people don't want to talk about at length. So we try and do content matched by audience needs to overcome that and build a brand connection. So the next one is about measuring effectiveness, and I think my clicker is still going to keep going crazy, so just bear with me. All of this stuff about embracing culture is all really good and well, and it's just brand positioning in the end. So I wanted to jump into how I go about measuring success, and I couldn't help but put a top Fishburne in here. I know some of you are probably familiar with him. But we know that likes and shares and comments are just vanity metrics that actually they don't correspond with revenue, and they've never corresponded very well with brand equity. So why are we measuring them or using them as a sole metric of success is the question I ask my clients a lot in the last couple of years. And then there's all this other useless stuff, and we measure things in a silo and not against other channels. So, you know, of course, I would say if I worked in one department that maybe my efforts are going well, but the numbers might not match up to what another guy is in a different department. So it's hard to get everyone on one page. Next slide. We're familiar with some other metrics, like that's. Can I give up on this and can you click through? Thanks a lot. So there's some other metrics that we've all heard before, like 91% of people who could buy your product don't actually click on your ads. We know that 53%, there can be a 53% error rate in demographic data. And that's because demographic data, we rely, some platforms, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's a lot worse, but some platforms rely on things like IP addresses or user-defined information or domain names, and actually none of those are very accurate in and of themselves. And then we know that we're obsessed with clicks as an industry, but if we optimize all our campaigns solely based on clicks, that the conversions cost 2.4 times more than it does otherwise. So, the elephant in the room might be, next slide, what does social even do? How do we measure it? And there's a couple, you can go to the next one. There's a couple interesting things, and I lifted these behavior segments from a visual IQ study, but they put it out a couple years ago, but I use it a lot with clients now. And it's essentially the idea that people behave in 3 types of ways on social or online more widely. There's the enthusiasts that are on there every day, very forward about providing their thoughts or opinions and you know, publishing on a daily basis on social. Dabblers might be in and out once or twice a week. And lurkers, you just aren't going to get them to engage with you. They don't want to. They haven't contributed in ages, and they're just scrolling past. But what's really interesting is that the enthusiasts contribute 80% of all content online, but they only represent 20% of the total digital population. So this is quite meaningful on the next bit, that even though we understand, like we know as a trend that engagement is decreasing with brands year on year, and it's kind of plummeted quite drastically. But we have to bear in mind that that consumption is increasing at twice the rate that engagement is decreasing. So if we're solely using engagement as a metric, we're probably thinking we aren't doing that well comparative to last year, but that might not be the case at all. There's a few reasons why people don't like to engage with brands like they used to. I think initially there wasn't a novelty effect, and people were quite, that, you know, it was quite neat for a brand to come and respond to you on social, and that's kind of not the case anymore. I think that has sort of that sort of excitement around talking with brands has decreased, and now they can just interrupt that space or that interaction you were having online. And then secondly, we quickly figured out that engaging with brands can spam our entire newsfeed. So I remember like 5 years ago, maybe more now, I liked Amazon as a page, and I had 2 people physically ask me in real life if I could unlike Amazon because every single day they were getting reminded that I liked Amazon. So I went back and I unliked Amazon as a page. So I think measuring the full picture is imperative to gauging success on social now. You can go to the next one. So bearing in mind that we know that social can play some kind of part in every part of the customer journey, but this journey is becoming less linear and it's becoming hard to follow and it's becoming convoluted with every digital channel that's out there now. Next slide. So, and tracking it back to ROI and if this is really working, this is a famous quote, and you've probably seen it before, but it's from the 19th century, and I think it's even more relevant in the 21st century than it was back then. So the 3 ways that I measure ROI in a truer sense are on the next slide. And it's around audience, which a lot of the KPIs will be around these 3 different categories. There'll be audience metrics, so we just want to see like who and in what degree are people responding or engaging or viewing our content, and I'll do reach and frequency test with that. We'll do split testing to see if a certain call to action or a certain piece of creative resonates with a particular audience. And you can do wider reach testing now. So if you're launching TV ads or other digital activations with the campaign, you can partner with various partners in the UK, like Nielsen, and figure out if people resonate or if that audience resonates or engages better in different channels, and then leverage that for your campaigns in the future. In addition, we'll do brand testing. So maybe the KPIs are around brands, so we could do an ad recall test to see how many people paid attention to that ad, and then the KPIs may be around reach. We do brand recall studies, like do you remember seeing this in the last 2 weeks? And that is a better indication of whether or not we could cut through the noise. But really, I think the KPI often always comes back to sales. So now we have ability to tie online and offline conversions together, and that's becoming more doable and significantly important to tie those 2 things together. And then we can do conversion lift studies, but I think Maria was talking about attribution, and it is becoming such a massive conversation lately. And these 2 things are what I always recommend brands to try and tackle. And you have to have your ducks in a row when it comes to some of these aspects. So attribution, you have to consider these things, and you have to set it up for success from the beginning. But it gives you a much more robust idea of what channels are working for who and where. So if you go to the next slide. If you haven't worked with the multi-touch attribution report before, this is kind of what it's going to end up looking like. So you can put a dollar amount against each category and put it next to each other to say, okay, for what audience or what segment is our marketing mix working best, and then tracking it back to revenue, which is what we all really want to know. Next slide. So interestingly, Facebook just launched their attribution solution, and traditionally Google was the go-to for this area, but they couldn't, as you probably know already, they did not track social media conversion or traffic very well from Google. So this is supposed to be a better option, and they obviously have all that social media data tied into this attribution tool. So I think it's significant because I have seen a lot of data saying that social media is driving higher ROI than more traditional ad spend like TV or outdoor. And it's just because we've been measuring it terribly with last click methods that we haven't been able to track this thoroughly or convince people to invest in social with appropriate budgets. So if you go to the next slide, I think the 3 takeaways that I focus on and I'd encourage you to give some thought to are embracing culture and live up to your values. I work with a lot of brands that just do pack shots or product shots, and sometimes they have brilliant values and they have an amazing ethos, but they're not communicating that to consumers. And that's what consumers really want. We want to connect with brands that have similar values to us, and maybe that wasn't the case 10 years ago, but I can say for myself, I find that to be completely true, and I see that working really well for brands that embrace that. So the second one is measuring effectiveness across channels. Try and build it out so you can build the big picture and see what's working where, and really track that ROI back to what's working best for which audiences, because every segment is going to be a bit different. And the third one ties in with the second one a bit, but it's thinking long term and understanding that this is for the long game. So don't try and measure everything against each other. I think sometimes as marketers or departments, we try and make conversions happen in a certain place. But if we were all working towards a North Star metric that actually, and we all had the same goal in mind, that would be a much better way of going about it. But anyway, I think that's it. Thanks.